I am Lauren Mitchell, 26 years old, and moving boxes back into my childhood bedroom. Not exactly where I pictured myself after earning my design degree. When my parents suggested a small project to keep me busy after losing my job, I nodded gratefully. Little did I know that small project was actually my grandfather's Victorian playhouse rotting in our backyard for 15 years. Dad smiled proudly as he unveiled the dilapidated structure. Mom squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "This will give you purpose while you figure things out." I felt my independence slipping away with each passing second. If you are watching this right now, drop a comment letting me know where you are viewing from. Hit that subscribe button and stay tuned to see how 3 months of forced renovation changed everything I thought I knew about my family and myself. Before everything fell apart, I was Lauren Mitchell, junior graphic designer at Apex Creative, one of the most prestigious design firms in Boston. My days were filled with client meetings, creative brainstorming sessions, and the satisfaction of seeing my work displayed across the city. I had a small but trendy apartment downtown, a group of equally ambitious friends, and a boyfriend who worked in finance. My life was on track, exactly as I had planned it. Then came the email. Company restructuring, they called it. A fancy way of saying they were cutting staff to save money. My entire department was eliminated, except for the senior designers with tenure. 2 years of climbing the corporate ladder, gone in an instant. The severance package covered 1 month's rent, but Boston is expensive, and the job market was saturated with other designers from competing firms who had also downsized. After 47 rejected applications and watching my savings dwindle to double digits, I made the call I had been dreading. My mother answered on the first ring as if she had been waiting by the phone. "Lauren, how are you, sweetheart? Did you get that position at the branding agency?" The concern in her voice made my throat tighten. "No, Mom. Actually, I was wondering if I could come home for a while. Just until I find something new." The silence lasted only a second before she responded with too much enthusiasm. "Of course. Your room is always ready for you. Your father and I would love to have you back." 2 days later, I pulled into the driveway of my parents' colonial-style house in suburban Massachusetts. The same house where I had grown up dreaming of escaping to the city. Mom rushed out before I could even turn off the engine, arms outstretched, her face a mixture of concern and barely concealed excitement. Dad appeared in the doorway, tall and straight-backed as always, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "There's our girl," he said, helping with my suitcases. "Just a temporary setback, right? You will be back on your feet in no time." That first evening was awkward but bearable. Mom had prepared my favorite meal from childhood roast chicken with rosemary potatoes. Dad poured wine and asked carefully curated questions about my job search, avoiding any mention of my failed career. The conversation inevitably turned to my brother Aaron's recent promotion at his investment firm, how he was being sent to London next month to meet with international clients, how he had just purchased a condo overlooking the harbor. "He always had a good head for business," Dad said proudly. "Even as a kid, selling lemonade at 10 times what the other neighborhood kids charged." I forced a smile, remembering how I used to spend those same summers sketching portraits of neighbors for free, because my parents had insisted art should be shared, not sold. Apparently, that rule didn't apply to financial services. After dinner, they showed me to my old room. It was painfully unchanged, the same lavender walls I had chosen at 15, design school posters still tacked to the corkboard, art supplies neatly organized on the desk where I had once spent hours drawing. "We keep it just like this," Mom said, fluffing a pillow unnecessarily. "Your little creative space." The way she said creative made it sound like a phase I should have outgrown by now, like my childhood obsession with unicorns, or my brief goth period in 9th grade. That night, lying in my too small twin bed, I could hear my parents whispering in the hallway outside my door. "She needs structure, Diane. Something to focus on besides those rejection letters." "I know, Richard. But she is so sensitive about her art. We need to be supportive." "I am supportive. I just think it is time she considered something more practical. Graphics design was always going to be competitive." I pulled the pillow over my head, but not before hearing my mother's final comment. Well, I have an idea that might help. Remember that old playhouse in the backyard? The next morning, over breakfast, they presented their grand plan. The Victorian playhouse my grandfather had built for me when I was 7 had been sitting unused for years. It needed a complete restoration, new roof, repaired windows, fresh paint, the works. "It will be good for you," Dad insisted, spreading jam on his toast with military precision. "Keep your hands busy while your job applications go out. Plus, you can use those design skills of yours. Make it really special." I followed them outside to see the structure, my heart sinking with each step. The once charming playhouse was now a dilapidated mess. The roof sagged dangerously, the ornate trim was rotting in places, and what remained of the paint had faded to a sickly gray. It was at least 3 times larger than I remembered, with intricate details that would require specialized skills to restore. "This is not a small project," I said, running my hand along the warped siding. "This would take months and cost thousands." "We have all the materials in the garage," Dad said dismissively. "And you have all the time in the world right now." Mom squeezed my arm. "It would mean so much to us, Lauren. Your grandfather built this with his own hands. It is part of our family history." I wanted to argue, to remind them that I was a grown woman with a career crisis, not a bored teenager needing a summer project. But the earnest hope in my mother's eyes and the financial reality of my situation silenced my objections. "Sure," I said finally. "I can work on it while I job hunt." That night, I cried myself to sleep for the first time since the layoff. Not because of lost jobs or boyfriend troubles or even the indignity of moving home at 26. I cried because in less than 24 hours, my parents had reduced me from a professional adult to a child with an arts and crafts assignment. My parents wasted no time implementing their restoration plan. The morning after agreeing to the project, I came downstairs to find a detailed schedule taped to the refrigerator. Playhouse restoration timeline was printed across the top in my father's precise handwriting, with daily tasks mapped out for the next 12 weeks. "We took the liberty of planning everything," Dad explained, handing me a cup of coffee. "First week is for cleaning and assessment, second week for structural repairs, then window restoration, roofing." He continued, but I had stopped listening, staring at the paper that had effectively scheduled every day of my foreseeable future. "What about my job search?" I asked, interrupting his monologue about proper wood ceiling techniques. "Oh, you will have evenings for applications," Mom said brightly, "and Sundays are free. We thought structure would help you feel productive." The garage had been transformed into a makeshift workshop. Stacks of lumber, shingles, paint cans, and tools lined the walls. Dad proudly showed me his collection of woodworking equipment, most of which I had never seen him use. "I bought these years ago for projects just like this," he said, patting a table saw affectionately. "Never had the time before retirement." It dawned on me that this playhouse renovation wasn't just about keeping me busy, it was fulfilling my father's own postponed hobby dreams. With resignation, I changed into old clothes and began the first task, clearing decades of debris from the playhouse interior. The small structure was filled with forgotten holiday decorations, garden tools, and boxes of my brother's old sports trophies. No one had been inside for years. As I worked, sweat dripping down my back in the summer heat, I found myself growing oddly protective of the little building. Beneath the grime and neglect, there was undeniable craftsmanship. The windows, though warped, featured hand-carved muntins. The doorframe was embellished with delicate rosettes. Someone had poured love into this structure. By mid-afternoon, I had cleared enough space to move around the interior. In one corner, partially hidden behind a loose baseboard, I noticed something carved into the wood. I knelt down, brushing away cobwebs to reveal my grandfather's signature. Samuel Mitchell, 1998. Below it was a small drawing of a paintbrush crossed with a hammer. I traced the carving with my fingertips, feeling a connection to the grandfather I barely remembered. He had died when I was 10, leaving behind only vague memories of a gentleman who always smelled of pine and peppermint. Behind another loose panel, I found a collection of my own childhood drawings, preserved in the dry space between walls. Crayon masterpieces depicting our family, my imaginary friends, and elaborate fantasy worlds I had created as a child. I remembered spending hours in this playhouse, using the walls as my canvas when Mom insisted I couldn't paint in the house. "Lauren, phone call!" Mom's voice broke through my reverie. I stepped out of the playhouse, squinting in the bright sunlight. "It's Keith," she whispered, handing me her cell phone with an encouraging smile. Keith, my boyfriend of 2 years. He had been giving me space since the move back home, his words, for the notable absence of calls or visits over the past 3 weeks. "Hey," I said, trying to sound upbeat. "How's everything in Boston?" His response was immediate and rehearsed. "Lauren, we need to talk. This situation, it's not working for me. Long distance is hard enough, but you don't even know when you're coming back." "It's only been 3 weeks," I said, my voice dropping. "I'm sending out applications every day." "It's not just the distance," he continued, as if reading from a script. "I need someone who's stable right now. My career is taking off, and I'm being considered for the Singapore office." The implication hung in the air. I was now unstable baggage that might hinder his ascent up the corporate ladder. "I see," I managed to say. "Good luck in Singapore." I ended the call and handed the phone back to my mother, who had been pretending not to listen from the kitchen window. "Everything okay, sweetie?" "Keith and I broke up," I said flatly. "He needs someone more stable." Dad looked up from his newspaper at the dining table. "His loss," he said gruffly. "But maybe this is good timing. Now you can focus on the playhouse without distractions. Put those art skills to practical use for once." The casual comment stung more than Keith's rejection. To my father, my professional skills were just a hobby useful for backyard projects. I returned to the playhouse without responding, slamming the tiny door with more force than the fragile hinges could handle. One broke off completely, clattering to the ground like an exclamation point on my frustration. 2 weeks into the project, my body rebelled against the unfamiliar physical labor. My once soft designer hands were now calloused and constantly sore. Every muscle ached from crawling under the playhouse to reinforce the foundation, reaching overhead to replace rotting fascia boards, and kneeling for hours to sand the intricate moldings. The schedule my father had created proved wildly optimistic. Tasks that he allocated a single day for often stretched into 3 or 4. Each morning, he would check my progress with thinly veiled disappointment. "The roof should have been prepped by now," he commented on day 16, examining my work with a critical eye. "You're falling behind schedule." "I'm doing my best," I replied through gritted teeth. "There was more water damage than we thought. I had to replace all the rafters, not just patch them." He shrugged. "Your grandfather built this entire playhouse in 2 weekends. Of course, he had professional training as a carpenter before he worked at the factory." It was news to me. Grandpa was a carpenter? I thought he always worked at the assembly plant. Dad waved his hand dismissively. "That was later. Come on, let's pick up the pace. The Hendersons are coming for dinner tomorrow, and I told them all about your project." This was another unwelcome development. My parents had been advertising my amazing transformation of the playhouse to their entire social circle, building up expectations I hadn't agreed to fulfill. My mother had even created a photo album documenting the before condition, ready to be paired with the triumphant after shots. That afternoon, my brother Aaron called via video chat. I balanced my phone against a paint can while continuing to scrape old varnish from the window frames. "Wow, sis, you're really getting your hands dirty," he laughed, his perfectly pressed collar visible even on the small screen. "Mom sent me pictures, said you're becoming quite the carpenter." "Not by choice," I muttered. "How's the world of high finance?" Aaron launched into a detailed description of his latest deal, the view from his corner office, and the luxury condo he was considering in London for his upcoming assignment. Mom appeared halfway through his monologue, eagerly taking the phone to hear more about his successes. I used the opportunity to take a water break, retreating to the shadiest corner of the yard. As I sipped from my bottle, I noticed a loose board along the playhouse foundation. Kneeling to inspect it, I discovered a small compartment behind the siding. Inside was a leather-bound book, its pages yellow with age. My grandfather's journal. I glanced toward the house, where Mom was still engrossed in Aaron's tales of corporate glory. Quickly, I slipped the journal into my pocket and returned to work. That night, after my parents had gone to bed, I examined my discovery. The journal spanned several years in the late 1980 seconds and early 1990 seconds. My grandfather's handwriting was neat but expressive, filling the pages with more than just daily activities. There were sketches, beautiful, detailed renderings of landscapes, buildings, and people. One portrait of my grandmother took my breath away with its tender precision. The written entries revealed a side of my grandfather I had never known. Before working at the factory, he had trained as an architect and artist in Boston. His dream had been to design unique homes that doubled as functional art pieces. Another rejection today. One entry from 1992 read, "Margaret says I need to think practically now that we have a son." She's right, of course. Richard needs stability, not a father chasing artistic pipe dreams. The factory has offered a foreman position with benefits. I start Monday. I turn the pages with increasing sadness, watching my grandfather's artistic aspirations slowly fade entry by entry, replaced by factory schedules and household budgets. The sketches became less frequent, relegated to margins rather than full pages. The final entry was dated just months before he built the playhouse. Richard's daughter was born yesterday, Lauren Elizabeth Mitchell. Margaret and I visited the hospital, such a tiny, perfect thing with curious eyes that seemed to take in everything. Richard talks of business school for her future, but I saw how she watched the colors of the sunset through the hospital window. She has the soul of an artist. I pray they nurture that in her, not crush it as my dreams were crushed. Perhaps I can build something for her, a place where creativity is welcomed. I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. The playhouse hadn't just been a grandchild's gift, it had been my grandfather's last creative act, a sanctuary built specifically to nurture the artistic spirit he recognized in me. "Lauren, what are you doing up so late?" My mother stood in the doorway in her bathrobe, frowning at the light still on in my room. I hurriedly slid the journal under my pillow, just reading. Her eyes narrowed. "You should be resting. Your father says the window frames still need finishing before the Hendersons arrive tomorrow. You can't afford to be tired." "Mom, did you know Grandpa wanted to be an artist? That he gave it up to work at the factory?" Something flickered across her face, recognition, then dismissal. "Dad always had his little hobbies, but he had responsibilities, a family to support. He made the right choice with the factory job." "It wasn't a hobby to him," I insisted, pulling out the journal. "Look at these drawings. He was talented, professionally trained." Mom's expression hardened when she saw the book. "Where did you get that? You should be working on the playhouse, not snooping through old things." "I found it in the playhouse. He hid it there." She snatched the journal from my hands. "This is private, and it's distracting you from your responsibilities." Her voice softened, taking on a patronizing tone. "Sweetheart, I know times are tough right now, but fantasizing about being an artist like your grandfather won't help you get back on your feet." "Being an artist is not a fantasy," I said, my voice rising. "It's my profession. I have a degree, experience, clients." "Had?" she corrected. "You had clients. Now you need to focus on rebuilding. Something practical, with security." "Like the playhouse?" I asked bitterly. "Yes. It's teaching you valuable skills. When the Hendersons see it tomorrow, Harold might even offer you that office manager position at his insurance company." The pieces suddenly clicked together. "That's what this is about? You're using this project to parade me in front of your friends' employers?" "We're trying to help you," she snapped, clutching the journal to her chest. "Your father and I are worried sick about you throwing away years on a career path that's clearly unstable. We just wanted to keep you busy while you found a real job." The words hung in the air between us, their honest cruelty more painful than any physical exhaustion. My own parents had never believed in me, had been humoring my artistic phase for years, while waiting for reality to set me straight. Without another word, I grabbed my car keys and purse. "Where are you going?" Mom called after me as I stormed down the stairs. "Somewhere my dreams aren't considered delusions," I replied, letting the front door slam behind me. I drove through the pouring rain to Amelia's apartment 30 minutes away. My best friend since high school, she answered the door in pajamas, took one look at my tear-streaked face, and pulled me inside without questions. For 7 days, I didn't return home or answer my parents' increasingly frantic messages. Instead, I slept on Amelia's couch, applied for design jobs from her kitchen table, and tried to figure out what to do next. On day 32 of the Playhouse project, or what should have been day 32 according to my father's schedule, I reluctantly returned home. My brief rebellion had been cut short by financial reality. I couldn't impose on Amelia forever, and without income, my options were severely limited. My parents greeted my return with a mixture of relief and restraint. Mom hugged me tightly but didn't mention our argument. Dad awkwardly patted my shoulder and immediately launched into updates about the playhouse. "I did some work while you were gone," he said, leading me to the backyard. "Just basic maintenance. Didn't want to overstep on your project." The basic maintenance turned out to be a complete rebuilding of the section I had been struggling with before I left. His work was technically proficient but lacked any artistic consideration. The replaced trim was simplified. The detailed scalloping I had been carefully restoring replaced with straight boards. "I figured function over form," he explained, mistaking my silence for appreciation. "Makes more sense for a playhouse anyway." I swallowed my criticism. "Thanks, Dad. I'll take it from here." For the next 2 weeks, I worked mechanically, following my father's schedule without creative input. Each evening, I sent out job applications. Though my portfolio remained unchanged due to lack of time to develop new work, the rejection letters continued to arrive with depressing regularity. Then, without warning, my parents announced they had invited the extended family over for a barbecue to see the playhouse progress. "Everyone's so excited to see what you've accomplished," Mom said brightly at breakfast. "Aunt Judith, Uncle Frank, Cousin Melissa, and her kids." "The playhouse isn't ready," I protested. "It's only half finished." "That's okay, sweetie. They understand it's a work in progress." But they didn't understand. When Sunday arrived, bringing with it a dozen relatives, all eager to see the amazing renovation project, their disappointment was palpable. The structure stood in the backyard like a half-transformed creature, part restored Victorian beauty, part dilapidated shed. "Taking your time with it, huh?" Uncle Frank commented, poking at a loose piece of siding. "Your grandfather would have had this done in a month, tops." Aunt Judith squinted at the mismatched paint samples I had been testing. "Interesting color choices. Very artistic." The worst came from my father's older brother, Uncle Walter, who had never approved of my career choice. He cornered me by the grill, bourbon in hand. "So the design career didn't pan out," he said, his tone sympathetic but his eyes gleaming with vindication. "Can't say I'm surprised. Another Mitchell artist who can't finish what they started." I nearly dropped my plate. "What do you mean, another Mitchell artist?" He laughed. "Your grandfather, of course. Samuel was always drawing buildings, talking about designing houses that would change the world. Margaret put a stop to that nonsense. Got him a real job at the factory. Best thing that ever happened to him." "You mean my grandmother forced him to give up art?" The pieces were falling into place. Forced is a strong word. She guided him to responsibility. Some people need that push away from impractical dreams. He looked pointedly at the unfinished playhouse. "Seems to run in the family." That night, after the relatives had gone and the backyard was quiet again, I confronted my parents in the kitchen as they loaded the dishwasher. "Why didn't you ever tell me about Grandpa's art? About how Grandma made him give it up?" Dad paused, a plate suspended midair. "Who told you that?" "Uncle Walter. And Grandpa's journal that Mom confiscated." Mom at least had the grace to look embarrassed. "We didn't confiscate it. We just didn't think dwelling on the past was helpful right now." "Did you know the playhouse was his way of creating something artistic again? That he built it because he saw me as an artist too?" My father carefully placed the dish in the rack. "Your grandfather had talents, yes, but he also had responsibilities. He made the right choice for his family by giving up his passion, his purpose, by providing stability." Dad's voice rose suddenly. by ensuring his family had health insurance and college funds and retirement savings, things your so-called passion has yet to provide for you. Richard, Mom cautioned, but he was too worked up to stop. We supported your art classes, your design school, your move to Boston. We celebrated when you got that job at the fancy firm. And where did it get you? Back in your childhood bedroom at 26 with nothing to show for it. Nothing except an education, a portfolio, and skills, I shot back. Which is more than I'm getting from this forced labor on a playhouse. We just wanted to keep you busy until you found a real job, he shouted, finally revealing the truth I had suspected all along. The kitchen fell silent. Mom looked stricken. Dad's face flushed with a mixture of anger and regret. A real job, I repeated quietly. Because graphic design isn't real. Art isn't real. Just like Grandpa's architecture, dreams weren't real. Lauren, that's not what Mom began. Yes, it is. I cut her off. You never believed in me. This project wasn't about preserving family history or teaching me skills. It was about keeping me occupied while you steered me towards something you approve of. Insurance with the Hendersons. Accounting with Uncle Frank's firm. Anything but what I actually want to do. I grabbed my keys for the second time that month. This time, my father didn't try to stop me. Where will you go? Mom called after me. You don't have money for an apartment. I'll figure it out, I said, hand on the door, without demolishing anyone else's dreams in the process. The slam of the door punctuated my exit, and I drove away with no destination in mind. Rain once again matching my tears. For the second time, I found myself on Amelia's doorstep. Unlike my previous dramatic exit, this time I arrived with a plan, or at least the beginnings of one. I need to find a job, any job. Something to get me out of that house and away from that playhouse, I explained as we sat at her tiny kitchen table. Amelia considered this while sipping her tea. What about your design work? Have any of those applications panned out? Nothing yet. The market's still saturated, and without new portfolio pieces, I'm stuck showing the same work as every other laid-off Apex designer. She tapped her fingers thoughtfully against her mug. I might have something temporary. Not design exactly, but adjacent. The something turned out to be a volunteer position at the Greenfield Community Center, where Amelia taught weekend yoga classes. They needed someone to lead art workshops for disadvantaged youth and couldn't afford to pay a professional instructor. It won't solve your money problems, Amelia admitted, but it would give you purpose, keep your creative skills sharp, and maybe even provide portfolio material. Plus, Marcus, the director, has connections all over the city. The next day, she introduced me to Marcus Jefferson, the community center's tireless director, a former corporate lawyer who had left the profession to serve his hometown community. He exuded both authority and warmth. Amelia tells me you're a graphic designer, he said, showing me around the center's art room, a modest space with mismatched tables, donated supplies, and walls covered in children's artwork. I replied, currently between opportunities. He smiled. Around here, we just say artist. Labels like professional or amateur only create barriers. Can I see some of your work? I showed him my portfolio on my phone, expecting the polite interest most non-designers displayed when viewing technical work. Instead, he studied each piece with genuine attention. You have a strong understanding of structure and visual hierarchy, he commented. But these corporate pieces don't show your personal artistic voice. What do you create when no one's paying you? The question caught me off guard. Between client work and job hunting, I hadn't created purely personal art in years. I'm not sure anymore, I admitted. He nodded, as if this was exactly the answer he expected. That's common in commercial fields. We forget to nurture our own creative voice while serving others. Our Thursday afternoon sessions could benefit from someone who understands design fundamentals. Are you interested? Despite the lack of payment, I found myself saying yes. Anything seemed better than returning to the Playhouse project with parents who saw my career as a phase to outgrow. The Thursday session changed everything. Faced with 12 young people ranging from 8 to 17 years old, I had to quickly adapt my professional design knowledge into accessible lessons. I started with basic color theory, demonstrating how complementary colors create vibrance when placed together. One student in particular, 14-year-old Jasmine, showed remarkable intuitive talent. Her color compositions were sophisticated beyond her years, but she lacked technical knowledge to develop her skills. "No one at school takes art seriously," she told me after class, helping clean brushes. "My mom says it's a nice hobby, but I need to focus on math for a real career." The familiar refrain struck a chord. "My parents say the same thing," I confided. Even though I worked as a professional designer, her eyes widened. "You got paid to make art? For real?" "For real. And I'll get paid to do it again. The industry has setbacks sometimes, but that doesn't make it any less valid as a career." Saying the words aloud, I realized I still believed them, despite my parents' doubt and my current unemployment. Art wasn't just a hobby or phase, it was my profession and calling. After 3 successful workshop sessions and positive feedback from both students and parents, Marcus approached me with a proposal. "The center received a small arts grant," he explained. "Not enough for a full-time position, but we could offer you a part-time paid role leading expanded workshops and developing a proper curriculum." The pay was minimal, barely enough to cover basic expenses, but it offered something priceless: independence and recognition of my professional skills. With this new perspective and the smallest financial cushion, I returned home one more time. My parents were surprised to see me carrying bags of art supplies, rather than looking defeated. "I found a part-time position teaching design at the Greenfield Community Center," I announced. "I start officially next week." "A teaching job?" Mom asked cautiously. "That's wonderful." Dad's reaction was more measured. "Is it full-time? Benefits?" "Part-time for now. No benefits yet. But it's in my field, using my skills, and it's a start." He nodded, clearly wanting to say more but holding back. I took a deep breath. "I've decided to finish the playhouse." This caught them by surprise. "Really?" Dad asked. "Even after everything?" "Yes, but on my terms, using my design sensibilities. It won't follow your schedule or plans, and it definitely won't be finished in time to impress the Hendersons or anyone else you're trying to get to hire me." My mother started to object, but my father placed his hand on her arm. "Your project, your terms," he said finally. "Just try not to burn it down or paint it neon green or something." It wasn't enthusiastic support, but it was acceptance, the first step toward understanding. That evening, I returned to the playhouse with fresh eyes. Standing back, I saw not just my grandfather's craftsmanship, but also his intention. This hadn't been just a child's playhouse, but a miniature artistic statement disguised as a practical structure. The proportions, the details, the hidden spaces for creativity, all designed with purpose. I pulled out my sketchbook, unused since my layoff, and began to draw. Not client work or portfolio pieces, but a vision of what this playhouse could become. Something that honored both my grandfather's craftsmanship and my own design aesthetic. Something that would tell our shared story of artistic persistence. When the first light of dawn broke through the trees, I had a complete concept, and for the first time in months, I felt like a designer again, armed with a clear vision and renewed purpose. I approached the playhouse renovation differently. No longer was it an obligation or distraction, but a canvas for meaningful expression. I created detailed plans that respected my grandfather's original structure while incorporating my own design language. The first step was convincing my parents to let me make significant changes to their expectations. "I want to add stained glass inserts to the windows," I explained, showing them my sketches at breakfast. "Nothing religious or elaborate, simple geometric patterns that will cast colored light inside." Dad frowned. "That's not what we discussed. Practical repairs, remember? This isn't just about repairs anymore. This is about creating something meaningful, a functional piece of art, like Grandpa wanted to do with buildings." My mother examined the sketches more carefully. "These are quite beautiful, Lauren. But do you know how to make stained glass?" "No, but I found tutorials online, and the community center has a volunteer who teaches glasswork. She's willing to help." After some negotiation, They agreed with the condition that I maintain the structural integrity of the building. It was a small victory, but significant. For the first time, they were acknowledging my creative vision rather than merely tolerating my hobby. The community center proved invaluable for resources. Marcus introduced me to volunteers with carpentry skills who offered advice on the structural repairs. In exchange, I designed new promotional materials for their upcoming fundraiser. It was a fair trade of skills that reminded me of the collaborative creative process I'd loved at Apex. Jasmine began visiting on weekends, eager to help with the project and learn design principles in a real-world application. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and her fresh perspective often solved problems I'd been overthinking. "Why not make the door round at the top?" she suggested when I was struggling with the warped entrance. "Like in fairy tales. Then the warping becomes a feature, not a flaw." Her suggestion was brilliant, working with the existing structure rather than fighting it. I incorporated her idea, creating an arched doorway that became a focal point of the design. As the playhouse transformed, so did my relationship with my parents slowly and with occasional setbacks. My father still checked my progress daily, but his criticism gradually shifted to curiosity. "How are you attaching the glass pieces?" he asked one afternoon, watching me install the first window panel. "Copper foil technique," I explained, demonstrating the process. "It's more forgiving than lead came for a beginner." He observed quietly for several minutes. "Your grandfather would have appreciated this attention to detail." It wasn't effusive praise, but from my father, it was meaningful recognition. One evening, working late to finish a particularly intricate piece of trim, I looked up to find him standing in the doorway with 2 mugs of coffee. "Thought you could use this," he said, handing me one. "You've been out here since dawn." "Thanks," I replied, surprised by the gesture. "I want to finish this section before the rain tomorrow." He nodded, examining the carved details I had added to the window frames, floral patterns that complemented the stained glass inserts. "I found you sketching at 3 a.m. last night," he said abruptly. "Your mother was worried." I tensed, expecting criticism about impractical late-night work sessions. "It reminded me of your grandfather," he continued unexpectedly. "He used to do that, get up in the middle of the night to draw when an idea wouldn't let him sleep. Drove my mother crazy." The revelation hung in the air between us. "You never told me that before." He shrugged, looking uncomfortable. "Didn't seem relevant. Until recently." "Dad, why didn't you support his art, or mine?" He was quiet so long, I thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he sighed deeply. I watched my father struggle. Rejection letters, financial stress, my mother taking extra shifts to compensate. When he finally took the factory job, things stabilized. We could afford a house, vacations, my college tuition. He looked at me directly. "I wanted that security for you. I still do. But at what cost? Giving up something I love? Something I'm good at? Is it worth the instability? The constant worry about the next paycheck?" I gestured to the playhouse around us. "Look what I've created here. Look at the joy it brings Jasmine when she comes to help. Look at how the community center students are thriving with proper art instruction. Yes, it's worth it." He didn't seem convinced, but he nodded slowly. "The stained glass is impressive," he admitted before heading back to the house. It wasn't full understanding, but it was a beginning. My mother's evolution was more subtle but equally significant. She began bringing her morning coffee to the playhouse, sitting quietly while I worked. "I used to write," she confessed one morning. "Poetry, mostly. Some short stories." It was such an unexpected revelation that I nearly dropped my paintbrush. "You did? When?" "College. A little after. I had a professor who thought I had talent. She traced patterns in the condensation on her mug. I stopped when I got married. It seemed indulgent with bills to pay and a house to manage." "Do you still write?" She shook her head. "I wouldn't know how anymore. But watching you work with such focus, it reminds me of how that felt." The next day, I left a blank journal on her bedside table. She never mentioned it, but I occasionally glimpsed her writing in it early in the mornings. By the 7th week of the project, the playhouse transformation was becoming impressive. The exterior now featured restored Victorian details painted in a palette of sage, green, cream, and burgundy. The windows sparkled with geometric stained glass panels that cast kaleidoscope patterns on the interior walls. Inside, built-in benches doubled as storage, and a small desk folded down from the wall, perfect for drawing or writing. Word of the project spread beyond our family. Neighbors stopped by to admire the progress. Marcus brought a small group from the community center to see practical application of design principles. Even my brother Aaron, home briefly between business trips, seemed genuinely impressed. "This is actually incredible," he admitted, ducking through the arched doorway. "You've turned a rotting shed into something magazine-worthy." "It's not finished yet," I replied, though his praise was gratifying. "Still need to complete the interior murals and install the reading nook. You know, my firm is looking for someone to redesign our client presentation materials. Nothing full-time, but it could be a decent freelance gig if you're interested." I considered his offer. 6 months ago, I would have jumped at any design opportunity, especially one with my brother's prestigious firm. Now, I found myself weighing it against my current projects and goals. "Thanks, Aaron. Let me finish this first, then we can talk details." He looked surprised, clearly expecting immediate gratitude, but nodded. "Sure, no rush. They're reviewing portfolios next month." That night, as I cleaned paintbrushes in the kitchen sink, I overheard my parents talking in the living room. "She's transformed that playhouse completely," my mother was saying. "Samuel would be so proud." "It's beautiful," my father admitted. "Impractical, but beautiful." "Maybe beauty has its own practicality, Richard. Look how alive she seems now compared to when she first came home." There was a long pause before he responded. "I just want her to be okay. To have security." "I know. But she needs to find her own way to that, not ours." Their conversation shifted to other topics, but their words stayed with me. For the first time, I felt they might be beginning to understand, not just tolerate my chosen path. As the playhouse neared completion in the final week, I worked with increasing intensity, often forgetting to eat or sleep. The structure had evolved far beyond my initial vision, incorporating elements of my grandfather's craftsmanship, my professional design training, and Jasmine's youthful creativity. The interior now featured hand-painted murals spanning all 4 walls, a continuous scene depicting a forest that transformed from spring to winter as you moved around the space. Built-in bookshelves held art supplies and my grandfather's restored journals, which my mother had returned to me, along with several sketchbooks we had discovered in the attic. "Your father is planning a reveal party," Mom informed me over breakfast. "He's invited the family back to see the finished project this Saturday." I nearly choked on my coffee. This Saturday? That's only 4 days away. I still have the ceiling mural and all the finishing details. "He's very proud of what you've accomplished," she said, her expression earnest. "He wants everyone to see it." The revelation that my father was proud, not just accepting, but actually proud of my artistic project was momentarily overwhelming. But the pressure of the imminent deadline quickly overshadowed the emotional impact. "I'll need to work around the clock," I muttered, mentally cataloging the remaining tasks. "I can help," Mom offered. "I'm not much of a painter, but I can handle finishing the trim or organizing the interior." Her offer of assistance was unprecedented. Throughout the project, my parents had observed and occasionally commented, but never directly participated. "That would be great," I said, touched by her gesture. "There's a lot of detail work that doesn't require artistic skill, just patience." The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. Mom proved to be a meticulous assistant, carefully applying polyurethane to the interior woodwork and organizing the built-in storage areas. Even my father contributed, installing the copper weather vane I had designed for the roof peak, a miniature paintbrush that spun in the breeze. By Friday evening, the playhouse was nearly complete. Only the ceiling mural remained a night sky with constellations that would glow in the dark, thanks to special paint Marcus had secured through an artist friend. "You should get some rest," Mom urged as darkness fell. "You've been working 16-hour days." "I'll finish the ceiling tonight and sleep in tomorrow before the party," I promised, mixing the phosphorescent paint. She hesitated in the doorway. Don't push yourself too hard, Lauren. It's already magnificent. I worked through the night, carefully painting each constellation and adding subtle touches of blue and purple to create depth in the night sky. By 4 in the morning, I had finished the artistic elements and needed only to apply the clear, protective coating once the paint had fully dried. Exhausted but satisfied, I returned to the house for a few hours of sleep, setting my alarm for 8 to complete the final touches before the noon reveal party. I awoke to the sound of thunder. Bolting upright, I checked the time. 9:17 a.m. Outside my window, rain was falling in sheets, driven sideways by gusting wind. My heart sank as I remembered the unprotected ceiling mural. The phosphorescent paint wasn't waterproof until sealed. I threw on clothes and raced downstairs, nearly colliding with my father in the kitchen. "The playhouse!" I gasped. "The ceiling isn't sealed." His face paled. He grabbed a tarp from the garage while I pulled on rain boots. Together, we splashed across the flooded yard to the playhouse. The damage was immediately apparent. Water had seeped through the unsealed roof join where the weather vane attached, creating a growing stain across one corner of my carefully painted night sky. The constellations were beginning to run, phosphorescent paint dripping down the wall like shooting stars. "No, no, no," I moaned, climbing onto a chair to examine the damage more closely. "Can it be fixed?" Dad asked, holding a flashlight up for me to see better. "Maybe. I need to dry it completely, then repaint the damaged section and seal everything before more water gets in." I looked at him helplessly. "But the party's in less than 3 hours." He checked his watch, then pulled out his phone. "I'll call everyone. Postpone until tomorrow." "But you've been planning this. The food, the decorations. It's just a party, Lauren." He cut me off with unexpected firmness. "This," he gestured to the playhouse around us, "is what matters. Your work, your vision. We'll reschedule." The simple acknowledgement of my work's value left me momentarily speechless. For months, I had believed my parents saw the playhouse as merely a distraction, a way to keep me busy until a real opportunity came along. Now, my father was prioritizing my creative vision over his own social plans. "Okay," I said finally, "let's fix this." What followed was 12 hours of intensive, collaborative work that I never could have imagined sharing with my father. He rigged a heater to dry the ceiling while I mixed new batches of paint to match the original colors. Together, we carefully removed the weather vane and properly sealed the roof join, then reinforced all the other potential leak points throughout the structure. As midnight approached, we stood side by side, examining our emergency repairs in the glow of work lights. The ceiling wasn't perfect. A subtle variation in color marked the repainted section, but it would require a trained eye to notice. "It still looks amazing," Dad said, genuine admiration in his voice. "Maybe even better than before." I was too exhausted to respond with more than a grateful nod. "Your grandfather would be proud," he continued quietly, "not just of the playhouse, but of your persistence, your vision." He paused, then added, "I'm proud too." In the harsh glare of the work lights, I saw something unexpected in my father's eyes, not just pride, but understanding. For the first time, he was seeing me not as his daughter who needed guidance toward a sensible path, but as a skilled professional with valid creative vision. "Thanks, Dad," I managed to say around the lump in my throat, "for helping me fix this, and for seeing what I was trying to create." He nodded awkwardly, emotional displays never being his strong suit. "We should get some sleep. Big day tomorrow." As we trudged back to the house through the now gentle rain, he added casually, "By the way, Rebecca Wilson is coming tomorrow. She's an old friend of your mother's." "Rebecca Wilson, the gallery owner?" I asked, suddenly alert despite my exhaustion. He tried and failed to hide a smile. "Is she?" I didn't realize. It was such a transparent attempt at nonchalance that I couldn't help laughing. "Dad, are you trying to network for me?" "Just inviting family friends to see my daughter's impressive work," he replied with feigned innocence. "What they do with that information is entirely up to them." For the first time in 3 months, I felt like my father and I were finally speaking the same language. The rescheduled reveal party began at noon the following day under clear skies that made yesterday's storm seem like a distant memory. My parents had transformed the backyard into a celebration space, with white folding chairs, flower arrangements, and a refreshment table centered around my mother's famous punch. Guests arrived in groups, their curious expressions turning to awe as they caught sight of the playhouse. What had once been a dilapidated structure was now an architectural jewel, nestled among the garden beds, its Victorian details restored and enhanced, windows glowing with colored light from the stained glass inserts. Uncle Frank, who had once dismissed the project as a waste of time, now circled the exterior with professional interest. "The craftsmanship here is exceptional," he commented, examining the restored gingerbread trim. "You've preserved Samuel's work while adding your own artistic elements. Very impressive." Aunt Judith brought her grandchildren, who squealed with delight at the child-sized arched doorway and immediately began exploring the interior features. "They've never responded to a space like this," she said, watching them discover the hidden compartments and interactive elements I had incorporated. "It's magical without being childish." Even Uncle Walter seemed genuinely impressed, though he tried to maintain his usual gruff demeanor. "Functional art," he muttered, running his hand along the carved handrail. "Your grandfather would have appreciated that." The most important guest, however, arrived last. Rebecca Wilson, impeccably dressed in a linen suit despite the casual backyard setting, greeted my mother with the warmth of old friendship before turning her professional gaze on me. "Diane has been telling me about your project for weeks," she said, offering her hand. "I must say, I was intrigued but skeptical. Playhouse renovation doesn't typically fall into the fine art category." I steeled myself for polite dismissal, but she continued with unexpected enthusiasm. "I was completely wrong. This is extraordinary, a perfect melding of architecture, craftsmanship, and artistic vision. May I?" She gestured toward the playhouse entry. For the next 20 minutes, Rebecca examined every detail of the structure with the critical eye of someone who evaluated art professionally. She asked pointed questions about my design decisions, the techniques used for the stained glass, and the inspiration behind the continuous mural. Finally, she joined me on the small bench beneath the reading nook window, sunlight filtering through colored glass to cast blue and green patterns across her notepad. "Lauren, I'm going to be direct. The Riverside Gallery is hosting an exhibition next month, focused on functional art pieces that serve practical purposes while maintaining artistic integrity. Based on what I've seen here, I'd like to feature your work." I blinked, certain I had misheard. "My work? You mean photographs of the playhouse?" "That, yes. But also any other functional design pieces you've created. Your mother mentioned you're a graphic designer professionally, but I sense your talent extends beyond the digital realm." It was the opportunity I had never dared to imagine, recognition of my artistic abilities separate from my commercial design career. The validation I had been seeking from my parents was being offered by a respected professional in the art world. I don't know what to say," I stammered. Rebecca smiled. "Say yes. Then come to my office next week to discuss details." As she rejoined the party, my mother approached, trying and failing to appear casual. "What did Rebecca think? She can be quite critical of new artists." "She offered me a spot in next month's exhibition," I said, still processing the reality of it. "She wants to feature my work." Mom's composure broke into a wide smile. "Oh, Lauren, that's wonderful." She hesitated, then added, "I may have sent her your online portfolio last week, just in case she was interested." The revelation that my mother had been actively promoting my work, not just tolerating my hobby, was almost as surprising as Rebecca's offer. "You did?" She nodded, suddenly looking uncertain. "Was that overstepping? I know you're an adult, but I thought—" I hugged her impulsively, cutting off her explanation. "Thank you, Mom. Really." As the party continued around us, my father approached with a small wooden box I had never seen before. "I've been saving this," he said, handing it to me. "It was your grandfather's. We found it after he passed, but the timing never seemed right to give it to you. Until now. Inside the box was a complete set of professional-grade paintbrushes, several sketchbooks filled with my grandfather's architectural drawings, and his complete journal collection, far more extensive than the single volume I had discovered. He left a note saying these should go to you when you were ready, Dad explained. I think he always knew you had his creative spirit. The gift represented more than just art supplies, it was an acknowledgement of a creative legacy that connected generations. My grandfather's suppressed artistic dreams had found expression through me, and now my parents were finally embracing that connection rather than fearing it would lead to the same struggles he had faced. The weeks following the reveal party brought unexpected developments. Marcus offered me a paid position developing and teaching an expanded art program at the community center. The salary was modest but sufficient to rent a small apartment nearby, my first step back toward independence. Even more surprisingly, my first session teaching the new curriculum was attended not only by my regular students, but also by my mother, sitting shyly in the back row with her own sketchbook. I thought I might try again, she explained afterward. Your father's taking golf lessons on Thursdays, so I have the time. Jasmine's talent continued to flourish under structured instruction. Using techniques I had taught her, she submitted a portfolio to the Regional Arts Magnet School and was awarded a full scholarship, the first student from her neighborhood to receive such recognition. My mom still thinks art is just a hobby, she told me after receiving her acceptance letter. But she's letting me go anyway. She said seeing what you created made her realize art can be serious. The playhouse became something of a local attraction. Neighbors brought visitors to see it, and a local magazine featured it in a spread about innovative backyard structures. My father, once so dismissive of impractical artistic pursuits, now proudly guided tours, explaining technical details and pointing out design elements with proprietary pride. With Rebecca's help, I converted a corner of my parents' detached garage into a small studio where I could create pieces for the upcoming gallery exhibition. The space quickly filled with works that combined my graphic design background with newly developed skills in three-dimensional media furniture with integrated digital elements, light fixtures that projected designed shadows, and wall pieces that changed appearance depending on viewing angle. Commission requests began arriving after photos of the playhouse were shared online. At first, they were small projects, custom mailboxes, decorative shutters, unique bookshelves, but each one built my confidence and portfolio while providing additional income. 6 weeks after the reveal party, I moved into my own apartment. It was smaller than my Boston place and in a less trendy neighborhood, but it was mine, earned through my creative skills rather than corporate employment. My parents helped with the move, Dad insisting on installing proper track lighting in the living room so your artwork shows correctly, while Mom arranged my grandfather's paintbrushes in a place of honor on my new desk. As they prepared to leave, Dad handed me an envelope. Your first month's rent, he explained. We were saving for a security deposit on that office manager position we thought you'd take eventually. This seems like a better investment. The gesture represented their final acceptance of my chosen path, not just tolerating my artistic career, but actively supporting it. I'll pay you back, I promised. No need, he replied. Just keep creating. That's investment enough. Their support didn't mean instant success or stability. The path I had chosen remained challenging, with inconsistent income and constant hustle for new opportunities. But for the first time since losing my job, I felt confidently on course rather than adrift. 3 months after beginning the playhouse renovation, a project I had initially resented as forced busy work, I returned to sit inside it one last time before my exhibition opening. The space that had once represented my parents' lack of faith in my career now stood as testament to unexpected growth and reconciliation. As evening fell, the phosphorescent stars on the ceiling began to glow, and I thought of my grandfather working at the factory while keeping his artistic dreams alive through small creative acts. I thought of my mother returning to writing after decades of setting her creativity aside. I thought of Jasmine preparing for art school, despite family skepticism. The playhouse had become more than a structure. It was a visible reminder that creative paths aren't always straight or secure, but they're worth pursuing nonetheless. Sometimes, the detours and forced projects we resist most strongly become the very experiences that reshape our journeys in meaningful ways. As I sat in the gentle glow of constellations my grandfather never got to see, I finally understood the lesson he had tried to leave me through this structure. Artistic expression finds a way, even when circumstances try to contain it. The playhouse he built as his last creative act had become the catalyst for my renewed artistic purpose and for healing the generations-old pattern of creative suppression in our family. If you've ever had someone try to redirect your passion or tell you to be more practical, I hope this story resonates with you. Sometimes the very projects we resist most become our greatest turning points. I'd love to hear about your experiences finding your own creative path. Drop them in the comments below. And if this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more of my journey, balancing art, family, and finding my way. Thank you for coming along on this unexpected 3-month adventure that changed everything I thought I knew about my family and myself.